as we wait. Well, there you go. Perfect. So I was gonna say, the meeting is gonna be recorded. So if you do not consent to it being distributed through our media channels, just let us know in the chat. We'll make a note of that and make sure that we either blur your face or we can come to a specific arrangement. So at this stage, I would like to invite you all to share a little bit about yourself. We've already been doing this, but if you don't know everybody in the room, it would be great that if you could share your name, maybe your email if you feel comfortable, or your LinkedIn profile, where you are based, links to your projects, and 1 or 2 lines about the projects and organizations that you are a part of that you are looking to bring back value to from this session. And so at the same time, I invite you to consider sharing questions that you are battling with in your work at this time. And so sharing this information will serve as our starting point of co-production for regenerative business ecosystems and net positive economies. And don't worry about capturing everything that's going on in the chat for yourself. After the session, we'll send over a transcript of the chat where you'll be able to find the information that we've just shared. So if you don't mind, yes, it is recording, to share a little bit about yourself. So yes, and so as that is happening, I just want to make sure that we are all speaking the same language when we talk about a net positive economy, right? So for us, simply put, what we mean at Evolutesix with a net positive economy is one that regenerates all capitals with the objective of supporting Earth's life-carrying capacity. And it includes business models that grow renewable energy production, material circularity, ecosystem protection and restoration, participative and inclusive governance, with a long-term orientation towards sustainability and a short-term adaptability in the face of unpredictability, as well as multi-capital or integrated accounting and disclosure practices. So that's what it means for us. And yet throughout this session, we'd love to hear from you. What else constitutes a net positive economy? So as well in the chat, please share your thoughts as we move forward. Okay, so at this stage, I'd like to say that I'm a firm believer that simultaneously directing our mental energies together is a strong first in manifesting what we envision. So I would like to invite you, if you want, into a short space of practice for our collective imagination through hindsight futurism. So at this stage, let's take a moment to close our eyes and take a deep breath in and summon a box and put all your physical, mental, and spiritual worries inside it as you exhale. Your mind is now clear and present, and you can focus all of your attention on the recognition that we all here in this present moment have a unique vision for what building a net positive economy means for us. Envision lines of connection arising between all the participants coming together from all of these diverse parts of the world. Now, use your mind's eye to envision yourself in the future. It is now December 7th, 2043, 20 years from now. See this future and allow yourself the perhaps unreasonable and indulgent belief that humanity has succeeded in preventing cataclysmic failure of all major Earth systems. We have developed a 100% circular, fair, and regenerative economy, neighborhoods, cities, and bioregions. Take a smell. How clean is the air when there are no fossil fuels? Have a feel. How is it to participate in this economy? How much stuff do you buy that is produced locally? What are your interactions with other businesses like? Have a wonder. What does business governance look like in this new paradigm? What kinds of net positive business models do you see that have become the norm? How much free time do people have to be their full human selves? Embody, how does it feel knowing with deep certainty that humanity has collectively driven away from the precipice of full Earth systems collapse? How does it feel to have lived a life dedicated to making Earth a good place to live? How does it feel to be one of those ancestors that showed up and did the things that needed to be done. It's December 2043, and you sit in your room on your rocking chair made from upcycled driftwood, looking out your window to a city covered in diverse trees, solar panels, and chirping birds. Next year will not be a silent spring. You feel a sense of deep satisfaction as you remember this very session right now, my voice, and the future we have just collectively imagined. Then you let your mind race through all the things that we have done as a species, which now fully understands itself as nature itself and has made this future real in 20 years. And in a flash, you see all that humanity has achieved together. Slowly, we start coming back to the present moment, carrying this sense of deep satisfaction and reverence with ourselves and our fellow humans for the change they want to see in the world. And we allow ourselves to carry this sensation for the rest of the evening. Take a deep breath in, let it out, and open your eyes. And as you come back into this space, I would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to write in the chat one thing that you imagined that you personally did or contributed to in those 20 years to build that net positive economy that you envisioned from the year 2043. Now, this practice of hindsight futurism has been the soup to this dinner as an entree, and before the main course, we'd like to recognize that what you want to do will not be without challenge. And so for that, we have prepared a little poll in anticipation of some of the challenges that you currently may face. So I'll be sharing that now, and please have a go at it and select the challenges there that you're currently working to overcome. And if the challenge that you're currently facing is not represented there, then please write it in the chat as well. So as we take a moment to fill it out and garner that information, I'd like to remind you that part of the objective of this session is to identify synergies and areas of convergence. So if anything that is said that is powerfully resonant with you, please react. You can use some of Zoom's tools to send emojis or engage with the comments in the chat. This way, we can better identify areas for cooperation. So let me check out the poll. See how that's coming along. Whoops. Graham, do you think that you can provide me with screen sharing abilities?
I believe I have this ability.
There you go. It's there. Okie dokie. So as we get that information, let's see what's coming up. Can
Could you
you
make
also...
it a bit bigger, Stefan? Perfect.
Right. So we see that most folks are struggling with developing people in alignment with their essence. Others are struggling with building net positive business models. Seems like scaling the deployment of financial and other capitals, generating and running multi-stakeholder governance, and understanding and dealing with the complexity of the business environment are common challenges that we face. And ultimately, we have some people identifying other challenges. And if you would be so kind to write them in the chat so we can have them in specificity and bring them also into that space. Yep, developing people in alignment with their essence. Okay, so maybe at this stage, as we continue to garner that information, I would like to pass it on to Graham. And as I mentioned in the introduction, Evolutesix's work spans all the way from the depth of the internal world as a starting point for transforming the economy that ultimately reflects at the global scale. Graham, would you like to speak to that?
I'm not quite sure specifically what to speak to yet. Where should I go? Where is the pull?
I would say let's kick off first with the category that has been selected by most people, which is developing people in alignment with their essence at the human level.
Right. So let me just end screen share for the moment. Wait a minute. Have I just only
I can
ended it
stop
for
it.
my?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So a few thoughts on the human development side. And it's where I started basically, and I think it's where everybody needs to start. So if I think about when I left Procter and Gamble, the very first things that I started diving into were things like the art of hosting, nonviolent communication, got involved in Otto Lasker's work on human development, stages of development, spiral dynamics, all of those things, and recognized, and I can now recognize 15 years later, even more clearly, having gone down some path of development, that what I can see today, I either couldn't see it 15 years ago, or I was seeing it in a much, much simpler form, something that was too simple to work rather than the simplicity that comes on the other side of complexity. So, that whole question is absolutely critical. And there are a lot of things out there. I can strongly recommend everybody following the art of hosting trainings. It's a superb collection of a wide variety of practices that are now implicit in everything I'm doing. Things like appreciative inquiry, open space, World Cafe, all of those, along with what's just struck me as the whole chaotic path. How do you walk along a path that is on the boundary between order and chaos? That is what we're doing in Evolutesix all of the time, is walking a chaotic path. So all of that is well worth attending. And on our side, we've integrated that together into something that we call the adaptive way, which is, in a sense, nothing special. Everything in the adaptive way already exists out there. But what we did was say, okay, individual development has to be an integral part of work. This is not something to do over the weekend in a retreat, and then you go back into the same old way of being when you're at work. And for example, Stefan and myself, or Marie and myself, whenever we're having a fight, we have fights in a structured way, following the adaptive way, because we know that that fight is actually giving us, or let me use the word tension perhaps rather than fight. That tension is actually just information that, let me take Marie, that the way she looks at the world, the way she makes meaning, the way she thinks is different to mine. And so even if we might actually agree, until we can see what we're looking at through each other's eyes, we may well be arguing, not because we disagree about what we're talking about, but because we're looking at that what through different eyes. And Marie might, and you may well know that three-dimensional figure where if you look at it from the bottom, it looks like a square, and if you look at it from the side, it looks like a triangle. Marie might be looking from the bottom and saying it's a square, and I might be looking from the side and saying it's a triangle. Well, actually, it's a three-dimensional thing that is a square and a triangle. So that's critical, and it's doubly critical if we really want to build a regenerative economy, in that one of the useful models is the dominant paradigm you could call conventional thinking. What came before that is pre-conventional, and what comes after is post-conventional. And one of the things that is holding us back right now is most people's identity is derived from their meaning-making attachment to the conventional paradigm of today. Business as it is, human interactions as they are, etc., etc. And to be able to implement the post-conventional ways of working that we need to implement, we have to be able to recognize in ourselves, where is our identity preventing us from making progress because we're attached to the way things were. I have that so often when we're working with a client to bring the Fair Shares Commons into a new territory. And Trey, you're working in Canada on that. This will come your way. When we were working with a lawyer, I now know where to start, because invariably the legal profession is one of those professions where the lawyer's self-identity is derived from their membership of the body of lawyers practicing the conventional paradigm. And so us bringing in a post-conventional way of incorporating immediately triggers resistance. The antibodies come out. The lawyer puts up the shields, pulls out a sword, and wants to start fighting with me. And so I've learned to first speak to the lawyer's identity, and only once I have the lawyer's identity guard dogs at rest is it safe for me to approach and talk about the post-conventional way of building and incorporating companies that we're there to talk about. The first few conversations with lawyers didn't go so well because I hadn't learned to work with, to start there. So I'd say that's at the heart of it. And in what we're doing with, well, it's something we practice consistently internally. And maybe that's something, Stefan, that is worth your picking up on, your perception as somebody that isn't me, on how we're doing that internally. And I'd invite questions, comments, discussions from everybody. Check. Oh, by the way, as a side comment, linked to self-development, one of the practices we have inside Evolutesix is that we tend to say check when we've finished talking, as a signal in terms of structuring the dialogue. Because of course, development is not just me developing myself, it's also how do we develop our interaction with each other as a collective person. Imagine what your brain would be like if every single brain cell was just firing at random with no sort of disciplined way of communicating across the brain. And we so often sit in meetings that are like the brain cells just firing off at random with no structure to the communication. And then we try to find the super brain cell. It would be as if we're trying to find the super brain cell that is more intelligent and better than all of the brain cells together. No, that's not going to get us there. We need to have developmental practices at the individual level and at the whole team level, so that the whole team can function as a super being way above the capacity of any of the individual human beings themselves. Right, I will say check there.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Graham. And I think also to put in that to say that as we move away from the paradigm of businesses as machines to be exploited and their parts, that is, their people replaced, the one of the key bridges as we move forward is in the conception of organizations as living beings being composed of further living beings. And if we take the analogy of a person growing, what is needed as well is for our cells themselves to grow and develop and multiply, which is to say that as we move forward into the paradigm of a net positive organization, then the development of organizations themselves is one of the drivers, or if you will, gas pedals that enables or invites rather the development of people as well. And so with that being said, I'd like to offer two things here. One is Nicole has a question, which is, does our identity lead us to assumptions and also to our limitations? So I would love for you to, Graham, to address that. And also considering that this part of the conversation came from the poll, I would love to hear from the audience, from whoever marked that, a little more from their own context, if they would like to share as well.
Right. So picking up first of all, Nicole, on what you've said, the foundation for how we look at the world is that, first of all, each of us is living inside our own experienced reality, which is unique to us. There are actually, sorry, let me just count, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 realities in this core. And this is one of the biggest challenges in working together, is we tend to think that there's only one reality, but actually in a group of 8 people, there are 8 realities present. That's a huge amount of work that we actually need to do to even say hello to each other. Hello in my reality might not be the same as hello in Parmjit's reality. Hi. So, that's the first part. And what that means is, yes, our identity is a consequence of the unique experienced reality that we're living in. And it both leads to our assumptions and is a consequence of our assumptions, in particular what we call big assumptions, which are assumptions that are so deep inside us that we're not even aware that those assumptions are there. And the very power of tension at work is that it gives us data that we can use to shine a light on these big assumptions that we're not even aware are there. And yes, it leads also to, let's say, there are 2 kinds of limitations. And this is where we're not too fond of the use of the concept limiting beliefs, because that's a bit too black and white. So there are some limitations which really are actual limitations. It would be foolhardy for me to try to do something that requires my height to be anything different to 1.90 meters. It would be foolhardy for me to try anything that is tantamount to hoping that there's a way for me to have a different past. Desmond Tutu used that so well in the South African transition, pointing out where expectations were tantamount to hoping that there's a way to change the past. So, those are actual limitations. And part of how we work is working compassionately with each other's actual limitations. But then there are limitations, and this is where we can engage. there are limitations that may be limiting us now in this context that are perhaps still protecting us in another context. In other words, we shouldn't try to eliminate these limitations. We should just recognize when they're serving us and protecting us and when they're holding us back, and work in a more subtle, nuanced way, and recognize that maybe they were beliefs that were only protecting us when we were 5 years old or 10 years old, and respect where they're coming from, not blame ourselves for having those beliefs, not use them as a whip to beat ourselves up, but rather work compassionately with ourselves. And inside Evolutesix, we have something, a practice coming from Keegan's work around instead of having policies and rules, we have what we call public agreements. And that is a recognition. Stefan has his reality and belief system. I have my reality and belief system. We each have our hardwired natures. And in a certain context, that means we are always going to have tensions. And we have an agreement on how we're going to do our very best to engage with each other in a way that is developmental and productive, accepting that most of the time we are not going to be able to hold to this public agreement, because to hold to it perfectly would actually require each of us to be different to who we are. And so it's how can we navigate compassionately in a way that maximizes our ability to work together without trying to, I keep thinking of the word terraform, like terraforming, except a person, not a planet, trying to change the other person to be somebody that they're not. So that's very much at the heart of how we work, and linked to it. And then I'll say check. I pointed at what we call the first 4 strata, which is the inner human, the interhuman, the organization, design, roles, tasks, accountabilities, and the incorporation, or the company as a whole. And we look at the company as a whole as a collective person. So the whole question of assumptions, beliefs, identity, the collective person, if the company as a whole is a sentient living being, we need to work compassionately with the company as a being. And that's why I talked about the difference between a brain cell, which is each individual person in the company, and the entire brain, which maps into the entire company. Check.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. I enjoyed listening. I really enjoyed that you opened and invited in your world and your perspective. Thank you so much. And I can relate to that on so many levels. Me personally, I always, and I felt like the weirdo most of the time in my almost 30-year career of studying human being and studying change and transformation and transition and organizations and everything, perceiving and a collective entity and organization as something unique, as something, as almost another person in the space. And I really feel that so strongly, energetically. But the more I embrace it, the more I own it, the more I can say it's interesting that it channels through me somehow. And it's something I can bring to what I work with my clients. So thank you so much. And back to the assumptions, I can see that too. And I can say, yes, agree. They either live in the past, and as exactly as you say, they're trying to change the past. They're regretting what happened, and if and what, and I would have said, and I should have said, and now if this would occur again, then I would have done it differently, or they wish and hope for a better future, something different. but it's not really happening that they live in the present. And to be honest, not even I live in the present all the time. So it takes a lot of my own practice, really doing that. It's happening in retreats, it's happening in moments like we're doing here. But even then, it's like, okay, I could attend this, I could do this and there. So that, thank you so much for really saying that. And I can say, just for my own work, that's really the biggest challenge in the assumption and limitation, bringing that to the workspace. And I loved how you said you're addressing the identity. I really love that, because usually I use the term of the ego or the mind, but I love identity so much more. It's cool. I'm taking that in my, really, thank you. It's really one of my learnings today. To see it that way, it makes it easier to bond with the person, to just leave it the way it is. It's the identity, and that's the way I can do, and that's the way I can deal with it, and that's the way I can build a relationship to for the moment. That's what it is in that. And that's what it's just. So thank you so much. Check for now.
I see Sharon has her hand up. You want to chime in?
You're on mute?
Yeah.
Here I am. Sorry.
Thank you.
All of this makes, and even when I say this, I think it was beautiful what you've put out there, Graham and Unstuffen and all of it. And right now, for me, I'm not in an organization. I am at a place in my life that I'm not, quote unquote, working. But in fact, I am trying to change that word, because I am working. But there's another word for it. I don't know what that word is yet, but I know. And so in that, where I am today is in building relationships. Because for me, the relationship with my own self is evolving, but also my family is evolving and changing. And I am, because I live right next to them. And I think what's really challenging for me is how to bring, and I had the opportunity to work with a startup, small business community development, affordable housing group. And what I went in with was just offering my wisdom. And the woman who is in the central chair, but her bosses, they're all over the place. There is no real organization, and the organization will be the housing project they say they want to get funded and build. And so all of a sudden, I'm in that. And even to bring up a higher conversation, the woman, Angela, who is my friend and colleague, she sees that, but she is held by her boss, the people who are providing the money that pays her, that's going to develop and or etc. So seeing that relationship and the relationship with a very difficult funding strategy for affordable housing and a mix of many funding sources, it's all about relationship. And I become, not you, I don't know, I contribute in the moment, but I don't have a great plan for how to alter the trajectory that I see unfolding from the past, from the assumptions, and from the funding assumptions and systems that are very old and are not different. And I wasn't seen as someone who could come in and offer that. And so in making my offer out in the world, it's like, a new place for me to build relationship, but I'm not trying to convince everybody. That's the other thing. I always want to convince. So anyway, that's a long story of my current experience, and my identity, and just being who I am in the moment and seeing what happens, and letting go of it. But I don't have a plan per se. Check.
Thank you, Sharon. I would like to invite any builds from what Sharon has just said, or perhaps from what Nicole has said, because my sense is that what Sharon has just said, in particular, not being seen, what she has to offer, not being seen by people who need what she has to offer, perhaps because they don't even realize that they need it in the first place, that has common ground for many of the people in this call. Check.
Brilliant. Thank you. So maybe we can move forward also with what's going on in the chat. There's a lot of activity. So Nicole has a question. Do you want to put it out yourself, or should I just read it, Nicole? Maybe give a little more context as well.
No, I can put it out. I don't know if we just reply to Sharon's first. That was because that's in the space too. I don't know. It's just I don't want to mess up the flow or something. So maybe I'm.
Oh, Sharon, you're muted.
Sharon, you're mute.
Yeah, what I said and what Graham said, this is part of what I'm experiencing. I want to hear it all, not just a reaction to me. I shared an experience and I shared questions. And for you, Nicole, you and I go back a ways, and yeah. I love you. And so whatever comes up next is what should come up next. And it all, in my humble view, not always do I know this, is the perfect thing. It is the thing that needs to come up that is, for me, clarifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe as a slight nudge and a pause, Nicole, Agata, I noticed from your expression that you seem to be very engaged in what we're saying is resonating with you. And I would definitely like you to invite you, if it feels good for you, to engage in the conversation. Trey, Parmjit, and I go way back, and I know that they will engage without any invitation as soon as the timing feels right for them. And I'm not seeing quite who ML Hardy is, so I can't quite place there, but you're also very welcome to engage if the timing is right. Check.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. This is actually my this kind of event, so sorry, I'm still kind of learning. I am currently not a part of any communication or any organization that's working on this kind of advancements, but I would like to be in the future. So this is kind of my start. I am learning what's the positive economy mean, like net positive economy. I'm learning all of the language. I'm learning the rules and the lack of rules that comes with it. So this is just the beginning of my journey. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here and hear your experiences. And I feel that it really resonated from Sharon, the part when you said about convincing, because I feel like sometimes, there is something that I learn, something even very simple. It's not about building a huge affordable housing projects, maybe even something smaller, like, when you make your tea, make it without the bag, make it like a loose tea, or, like a small gesture. And I just feel like I want to scream it to the world and, make everyone aware. But everyone is on their own journey. discovering these things. So I feel like maybe, yeah, that's my recent realization, and trying to be more aware of that one, because no one wants to be forced to do anything, and that just can even push them further away. And thank you so much for having me here. Check.
Yeah, building on that, Agatha, it's absolutely superb that you have joined us, that this may be contributing to your learning journey. And I look forward to what else might be contributed. And the one thing I will put in, part of what's very deep inside everything we're doing is the recognition that each of our lives is a connected path of events. And most of the things that happen to us, certainly everything that's happened to me, I could never have planned the journey that I've gone on when I was 20. But but I would not change anything of the journey that I have gone on, because if I hadn't gone on that journey, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And I'm really, really pleased that I'm doing what I'm doing now. Yeah. And to give you an example of that, I moved to London because my ex-girlfriend wanted to move to London because as an American, her teaching certificate allowed her to teach in London without having to recertify or anything like that. So I moved to London, and she decided that life with me was just a little bit too stressful because I was too dedicated to what I was doing. So she left me in 2017 and I moved back to Belgium. But because I was living in London, I think it was in 2015, Rethinking Economics had a conference in London, and I went along to that conference just to, well, it was free. I could go there. I thought I might learn something interesting, and sat down in a talk given by Jack Reardon. Asked Jack in that talk a question about what is the identity of economists, the stage of development of economists, what impact has that had on economics as a discipline and the global economy? Jack loved the question. We talked until the last tube back home that night, talked the next day, agreed after that we would write a book together, and that led to Rebuild being written by Jack and myself and published 5 years later, and led to publishing that book together with Jack at the beginning of this year. So if it hadn't been for Jean needing to move to London, I'd never have met Jack. I would probably never have had the trigger to start writing the first book. I would never have written the second book, and none of us would be here in this conference together. So yes, there was pain involved in breaking up with Jean, but nothing that has happened today would be possible without that part of my life path. So you have much more of your life path ahead of you than I have, for example. So it's wonderful to have you in the call. Check. Yeah. Stefan.
Yeah, I'd love to speak also to something that Agatha said right at the end of her comment, which was that nobody likes to be told what to do. And I think for the most part, that is true. I guess there are, some people that can somehow only work while being told what to do. And let me see, because there's like so much to be said about that statement. But I'll start off with this, which is, I was listening to a conversation last night, very new piece of content put out between Daniel Schmachtenberger, John Vervaeke, and I forget his first name, but Mr. Gilchrist. And they were talking about the psychological drivers behind the meta crisis. And I can share the link in a moment later, or maybe Graham, you can. And amongst the many, 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 many things that they were touching upon there was sort of this question of where, in the context of like living in community and being in society, you know, like where do we go for certain things? Where do we go for knowledge? Where do we go for science and technology? And sort of like there's institutions for that and so on and so forth. And the conversation was sort of discussing where do we go for wisdom? And I thought that that was a very powerful question, because at least I'm originally from Costa Rica. I lived in Poland for a little bit, and then I'm now in the Czech Republic. And so I've been in the West all of my life, right? And I'm you know, not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not a religious person. So the whole like go to church and, you know, get wisdom there thing doesn't really work for me. Or the temple or whatever. Wisdom arises between conversations, so you can do that. But sometimes I'm living in a farm. I'm kind of isolated most of the time. So that also sort of like doesn't help sometimes too much. But what I'm getting at is, I thought that was an interesting framing, because it was inviting us to look for wisdom outside. And I think that that is half of the story, perhaps even less, because so much of the wisdom and of the truth that we live can only be answered and generated by asking ourselves. And having that sort of internal, sometimes it's a confrontation, sometimes it's a fight that you have with yourself, sometimes it's like a very gentle conversation, sometimes you feel like you're having an argument with your dad and he's like screaming at you, but it's yourself, and it gets confusing and it's kind of messy and it's kind of weird. But ultimately, when it comes, and you know, this is where I latch onto your comment, which is, I am not a person that likes to be told what to do. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I can't stand it. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why working at Evolutesix for me has been optimal, because the way that we conceive of this is everybody has agency, everybody has wisdom. Let's work in a way that helps people's level of socio-emotional development and cognitive development grow, so that they can be more in touch with that wisdom and that knowledge. Because ultimately, people are best incentivized to do whatever it is that they ought to do if it is in alignment with what they want to do. And that can only come from a process of asking yourself, like, or trying to define to some extent, and even though it's, you know, cloudy and messy and nebulous, who you are, what you want. And so for that reason, you know, I shared the link to the book, because, and just I'll finish off with this, you know, I was in university when I was reading that book, and I was sort of in this in between of like, my university doesn't really want to teach me about the things that I need to learn in order to like really save the world, but Graham's doing that. And so, you know, who am I? Am I this like student that cares about like the grades and going to university and paying attention and respecting my professor? Or am I the person that is willing to disrespect an institution that, through its sheer willful ignorance of the death of Earth, becoming illegitimate by the day? And am I going to stand in the camp of the people that said, screw that, let's like work together and put our brains together and try to like figure out through our wisdom what we can do moving forward? That sent me down a bunch of different paths. I did activism and all that stuff, you know, for a while. And ultimately sort of, and I'll just end with this, which has been a thing in my mind for a long time, which is, given the context in which we are in, sort of like two camps where you can stand in: revolution or reconstruction, right? Dismantle the old or build up the new. And which one fits more with you, right? What aligns with your essence? What does your wisdom tell you? Nobody will tell you. Only you can. I mean, people can ask you questions, right? But only you can answer. So that's my spiel. Okay.
Two things I'd like to put in just briefly, building on what Stefan has just said. One of them is Don Beck published an article quite a few years ago of the 8 categories of change response. And category 8, which is really rebuild everything from a blank sheet of paper kind of thing. This is a transformation, a change that is epochal in nature and requires a complete change. That's what we need today. It's the hardest to do because it really requires letting go of all sources of security and certainty that come from the conventional way of doing things. We can, if you Google change response, Don Beck, and it was published in the Cosmos Journal about 15 or 20 years ago now, something like that. You'll find it. If you don't find it, email Stefan or myself and we can send it to you. So that was the one thing I wanted to put in. The other thing I wanted to put in, which is part of what all animals, human animals as well, seek, is security, safety, certainty, predictability. And life is just not safe, secure, or predictable. You cannot be alive and have safety, security, and predictability. And part of what holds us back is our challenge to really let go of the rock face we're clinging to and start to abseil down it. If any of you have also done any rock climbing, you cannot start abseiling in steps and stages and degrees. You are either clinging to the rock face or you are falling. There's nothing in between. And that's what we need to do now, is find a way for all of us to just collectively let go of the rock face, start falling, and just trust that whatever happens is better than what would have happened if we'd continued attempting to cling to a rock face that is crumbling anyway. Check.
So at this stage, I just want to bring it real quick. So it's 1 minute till the closing time. So I just want to check in with everybody and see if they're willing and able to spend some, 10, 15 more minutes, because it seems like we still have a lot more to talk, or if there's anybody here that has to excuse himself and leave the room. If that's the case, amazing. Thank you so much for coming. I guess what I'm doing here is like officially closing the session, but let's go to the after party where it's like where the fun stuff happens. Yeah.
So I can stay for a bit. I would like to have the opportunity to weave back to the 2 questions that Nicole posed in the chat. And I'm willing to stay for that conversation. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Would you like to kick that off?
I don't know if it would be me kicking it off, but so first of all, I'm curious about Graham's answer to the first question. Can an economy even be net positive?
Right. I know you, Trey. I know that smile on your face. So let me start by taking what we're pointing at with the word economy to perhaps a different place to what is normally used to point at. So Jack and I define an economy as any tool that a system uses to do the job of provisioning. Or in simple terms, it's whatever agency, mechanisms, dynamics are created by a system to get what's needed to where it's needed from where it's abundant. So I look at the entire biosphere as an ecosystem with an economy in it. And it's an economy where the primary capital is energy, And the primary currencies of that capital are carbohydrates and fats, where we've just lost Agata. Okay. The primary currencies are carbohydrates and fats. The bank, or the source of that currency, is the sun, which pumps in continuously every day a steady stream of currency that then trickles down through the economy. And the way that that economy works is it is completely net positive. Everything that happens in that economy is steadily increasing the capacity of the planet to support life. So in that sense, I actually do believe that it is possible to build a net positive economy, because we're here because for millions of years, a net positive natural economy has been thriving on the planet and has continued to enhance the carrying capacity of the planet for life, which has led to the emergence of such a complicated life form as we are, that we are now single-handedly as a life form doing a superb job of destroying the carrying capacity of the planet for life. You know, that's really quite an astonishing achievement of the planet, to create a life form that is so powerful that it can destroy the very carrying capacity of the planet, at least short term. Yeah, in another 100,000 years, the planet won't even notice that we were here. If we disappear in the next decade or century. That's an illustration of just how net positive that economy is. It can even recover from something as cataclysmic as what we're doing to the planet now. It will just take a geological amount of time to do so. So really, I have no doubt that the answer to that question is yes. The subsequent question to that, really, which is what has been driving our work, is what are the building blocks and the structured interactions between those building blocks that work in harmony with the economy of nature, so that the human economy is manifestly a subset of human society, which is manifestly a subset of all of nature and nature's economy. And I have no doubt that we can do that. And a big part of that is what's in the second book, Ergodic Investing and Entrepreneurship, because part of what makes nature's economy inherently net positive is that nature doesn't try to pretend that the world can be made predictable and safe and secure. It says it's inherently unpredictable, unsafe, insecure, and recognizes that the best strategy to be net positive in that situation is to have very, very high levels of collaboration, blended with competition, of course, and hard collaboration, that capitals are pooled between competing species and between competing members of a species. And once we can get to that point, then we have a chance of building a net positive economy. We can't do it if we stay within the conventional paradigm and the building blocks of our conventional paradigm. We have to get to post-conventional building blocks, which unfortunately have to have common ground with the pre-conventional building blocks. So things like the fair shares commons, a lot of people look at it and think that it's the same as the pre-conventional commons of the economy 500 years ago, and that we're trying to drag business back, and that we'll lose everything that people want to still have. No, the fair shares commons is post-conventional. It's transcending and including everything that works to get to something that is actually new, even though it looks as if it has some of the features of the old. And that's where it comes back to the developmental bit. It takes time for the post-conventional to be, let me say, what's the word I'm looking for? Visible is not quite the right word, but for it to be able to be seen. It's a bit like, Sharon, what you were saying. What's offered is not easy to be seen because it's filtered through the conventional paradigm. Check.
So that would weave us back to the second question, but also for full circle to the topic that everyone seemed to be interested in, which is the personal. Did you want to say something, Nicole?
You mean in what? In the personal? What is the concrete question? Sorry, I didn't understand that well.
Trey saw your hand moving.
I saw
and
your hand go up, so I wasn't
No.
sure if there was anything you wanted.
No, sorry. No, it was not
Oh,
that.
that's
Sorry.
okay.
It was kind of, I don't know, a reaction on the thought I had. I put something in the chat. I was trying to listen and I could follow what Graham said. So I was not like raising my hand or so. But yes, if there's anything I can clarify with my second question, I would love to. But for now, I don't know really what to add. So
Okay.
thank you so much though
No,
for your.
no problem at all, because I'm very interested in your second question as it connects back to
Yes.
this original topic that everyone sort of
Yes.
seemed to be interested in today.
Yes.
And because it appears to me, and this is just at a distance, Graham, so I will 100% confess that I am not in your shoes at this moment. I'm really curious about, let's not call them investors. I'm just going to slightly reword your question, if I may, Nicole. Let's just say high net worth individuals, okay?
Yes.
Whether they're investors or benefactors or whatever camp they want to land in. I'm curious from your work on and forgive me if I'm saying, is it ergodic? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that word correctly. Thank you so much. Your work on the book of the ergodic investor. Let's just call them the ergodic high net worth individual for the sake of argument. What do you perceive is the difference, the key difference in the mindset that needs to be happening for all of us to be more ergodic? Okay, because to me, and I'm just going to throw this little tidbit in, is that the common ground is that we all have conversation. Whether it's someone who's a high net worth individual or not a high net worth individual, we all put our pants on one leg at a time if we wear pants, right? And so what we have in common is how we're being in conversation with each other. And so I'm curious, what is that key mindset or that key difference, Graham? Is that a direction that you're comfortable going in?
Absolutely.
May I add something, Graham? Sorry that I interrupt. May I add something from my background of the question? I think that would just add a little bit that you could buzz it out and in a little more, if that is okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm working with, I call them visionaries. There are people, they hold a strong vision of changing the world. So like visionary entrepreneurs, leaders, and just keep it short, visionaries. Those are people, they really have a strong idea what they have to do. They also have the capacity of doing it, and they want to increase, of course, more impact. As it happens, I somehow attract more investors. People, they want to put their money, their own money, in, as they call it, emerging markets. The United Nations call them also like the global south, which is an awful term. If we have a better idea, please let us know. I would love to find a better name for that. So however, they invest the money there, Africa, Asia, and especially renewable energy, because their idea is energy is thriving the world. And we're going to bring renewable energy and green tech to areas, let's say, marginal communities. They're not really connected to energy yet. And they know by that it's not only the energy, what they're bringing. And that's why I'm coming into the game, because my entire background is social work, social scientist, how to activate communities, how to really do that. And that really drives me crazy. I really have to say, it drives me crazy. How can a person from a Western hemisphere, a Western understanding of investment, come in that also, I'm sorry, it's really, that is the assumption, that's the limitation. Colonizing, they're not bad people. They have the heart at the right place. They want to do something good. But you know where that can lead. You come there, you bring the money in ways of, oh, let's invest in green energy and clean, not clean energy and green technology, so I want to say. And then it happens. They have access to energy. The kids can go to school. Women already all of a sudden have time. What they're going to do with their time? They liberate from old structures. So we're going to have turmoil in the social systems there. So that is really something. So what I'm working on is, you cannot only bust the money there, you have to activate the community somehow. For some reason, you need to have the peace. I have to say, I was born in East Germany, so I witnessed, like, you know, all the turmoil in 89 and 90. So that really shaped my perspective on the world and everything. And the other thing is also, how can you secure that the community itself starts with the money you bring in by, let's say, the green technology, the clean technology, that the community itself fuels and activates, or even gets ideas of how can we cash pool or whatever, I don't know. So that is really something I'm looking for an answer. Thank you so much. So that's what I just wanted to add. Graham, I'm so curious to hear what you have to say.
Beautiful, Nicole. I absolutely loved what you said. Out of curiosity, where in East Germany are you from?
Close to Halle Saale, Saxony-Anhalt. That was where I was born, but I've been living in Bavaria in different ways of Germany and different countries for, not countries, states for, I'd say, almost 30 years now. So
Right.
I see myself more as a global citizen. I'm married to an American, so I'm not really hospitable. So it's really different for me.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So, yeah, I'm also very much a global citizen. So I'll put in a couple of thoughts here spanning what Trey was pointing at and what you're pointing at, Nicole. I'll start with where you are. So I was born in Africa and grew up in Africa. I identify as an African and as a European. And I really resonate with what you're saying. Too many countries are littered with the harm and the derelict projects that were brought in by people with the very best of intentions. And it's the issue behind that. Well, there are many issues behind that, and a lot of them are strongly connected with identity. And what does the, let me say, investor or capital steward, what does money mean to them at an identity level? What needs are they trying to meet of their own by deploying the money in the way that they are? And what's absolutely necessary, which is nowhere near common enough in the whole world of philanthropy, donors, and so on, is that money goes in with no strings attached. And where the money fully respects that there are two distinct experts in this relationship. There is an expert in money and there is an expert in the needs and opportunities of the local community, and that they really meet eye to eye as two experts in a relationship of we are equals, but completely unique and different to each other, and both standing on the common ground of the difference we want to see in the world. And let's strengthen that common ground, not by one of us suppressing our uniqueness, but by both of us enabling each other to enhance our uniqueness. Yeah. And that comes together with increase in tension, not a decrease in tension. That is a relationship that the more that we invite each other's uniqueness to really show up, the more that there will be tension, the more that there needs to be fluidity in dialogue patterns that can scaffold that tension, can hold it. And that's a big part of what we bring in. And that then feeds in also to the whole part of the whole essence of what we're doing, and the point of ergodic investing as a post-conventional way of investing is nature works because there is nothing in nature that tries to stop the shark from being a perfect expression of sharkness. And that is what we need. If we're dealing with somebody who happens to have lots of money and their essence is sharkness, we need to have an ecosystem that is able to channel that essence of sharkness in such a way that it is beneficial to the ecosystem as a whole. And you only have to look at the studies, for example, in Australia, of what happens to a marine ecosystem if the sharks are removed from the ecosystem. It collapses. It's not net positive. It's not regenerative, let alone, it's not sustainable, let alone regenerative, if it doesn't have sharks there that are perfectly expressing the essence of sharkness. And this, to my mind, is one of the issues that we face today. So much of the endeavors to create a regenerative economy are requiring the uniqueness of different people to be suppressed. We're trying to suppress people's egos, their identity, and say, everybody needs to sign up to these values, these ethics, these norms of behavior. And if you don't sign up to those, we will squash you. Whereas what we actually need is what we call uni-oneness, full expression of your uniqueness, but in a system, structures, and structured interactions that enable the perfect expression of your uniqueness to contribute to the strength of the common oneness, the ecosystem as a whole. And that's where I think that what we're offering is actually far better for investors, even the extreme shark investor, and of course the dolphin investors. It's far better for them. And so the only mindset shift needed is a mindset shift of, all right, is a mindset shift across everybody, not just the investors, that says, for each of us to thrive as individuals, we need to collaborate as a collective. And it's that embracing the paradox. My individual success, even if I'm just selfishly motivated, is best served if I'm in a collaborative profit pooling ecosystem that, yes, competition has a role to play there. There is a role for shark essence to be expressed, but it's being expressed not as an either or, but a yes and, with collaboration and profit pooling. Check.
So at this stage, I guess we can start to wrap up. We're, 20 minutes over time, which is great. We can, after parties go all the way to till, the morning, right? If they're good. And it seems like we could do that as well. But I just want to be mindful of people's time. So
it is already Trey's morning and Sharon's morning, so
right. So yeah, they're on the fun side of the after party time. So perfect. So I would just like to offer, if anybody would like to have some closing thoughts, mine would be as follows. So be on the lookout for a follow-up email with a transcript of the chat, the recording. We'll also be posting that on LinkedIn. And as we move forward in Evolutesix into 2024, we'll be organizing more events like this. So what this was a trial, basically. And what we have identified is that there is a need for these conversations to keep on happening and keep on being co-creative, right? And so what we are intending to do next year is to have monthly conversations such as these, and grow this movement and grow that co-production of regenerative business ecosystems, exchange all forms of capital down the line, so that together we can collaborate to form that world that we all want to live in, and our future children, offspring, cats, what have you, will be able to live happily. So thank you everybody so much for attending today. This was incredible. I loved everybody's input. It's funny how you can have such profound conversations that give you that sense of intimacy with people so very far away that just come in this screen. I love that about our community, broadly speaking, the regenerative community. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Anybody-
much. Really fun.
Thank you, Nicole. Wonderful having all of you here. Anybody else want to say any sort of closing thoughts about what's been valuable for you out of this call?
Start. I think the connection with all of you, but I think your point, Graham, about ongoing conversation. This for me has been one of the most focused conversations about, even though we all may be in different places, I felt like there was enough structure in what you were inviting. I mean, I stepped into an invitation, I guess, is what I'm pointing to, and enjoying the trust and conversation that people came to it, that this is my sense of it, came to the conversation. And that this is how I see for myself, going back to my community and some of the opportunities that are out there. It helps me, it gives me hope. And that's a big thing. So you gave me hope, and that there is, no matter what, there is love in the world, and any group of people can show up, and showing up is, for me, expressing my love for the world and my respect for all of you.
Thank you, Sharon. Any other closing thoughts or comments to put in?
I loved our conversation today. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
No, you go
MJ.
ahead. You go ahead.
Thank you. I loved our conversation today. Thank you so much. And really you inspired me a lot. I took really a lot of notes for really sorting my own thoughts, and it really was pretty helpful. And I was thinking, man, if this is already so inspiring, what would it be like working with you guys? So thank you so much, really opening that space. I loved it. Thank you. And I really I really love the energy in this space. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. We'll have a follow-up conversation about that. Pamjit.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. I just want to pick up on the word inspiring, and some reason, Graham being like a bit of a nerd, I guess, is one way of putting it, with a lot of knowledge, and he writes huge books, and to see like young people turning up in the space like Stefan and Agatha, and then there's Marie as well, who's part of your team. It's like just great that young people find that an attractive magnet to gravitate towards. In other spaces, you know, it tends to be like a higher average age of people that are coming along into the space. So, well, I don't know what you're doing, Graham, but carry on doing that. It's really great to see. and you know, thank you for the young people, because you guys, you're our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamjit. Very much appreciate your words. It is something I deliberately do, and something that in some senses comes naturally to me. So, but very appreciate your seeing that and the feedback that you value that. Check. Trey, do you want to put in any closing thoughts?
There's so much. I would say probably the highlight for me was Nicole's two questions, which is why I wove back to them, because, and I say that in all sincerity, Nicole. I have been wanting to dig in a little bit more to your work, Graham, in terms of what is ergodic. Okay, what makes our conversations ergodic? What is it that encourages all of us to be in the dialogue? Because the more we are being it, the more we can do it, right? It's the being feeding the doing, and the doing feeding the being, and it just is this beautiful little loop. And so for me, digging into that a little bit more, digging into that question was the highlight of the call for me. It was also very curious for me when you did the mentee survey at the beginning to see that the topic that rose to the top wasn't about finance, wasn't about money. It had to do with personal development. And that that was an interesting signal to me, because I can remember a time where that would not have been the case. And I think there's been a real distinct shift in the field since COVID in particular. And I'm really, really curious to see where that wave is going to take us. So really grateful. Thank you so much for the call.
Beautiful. And for me, what I'm taking out of this call, what was really valuable for me, was very much the opportunity to engage in dialogue with so many other people who are doing so much in complementary areas to what we're doing. And I'm coming out of this call with a boost to my sense of hope and grounded optimism. Check. Wonderful.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. We'll leave it at that then, yeah?
Great. Thanks
Good
all.
night. Good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.